Hey guys, I'm here today to talk about my all-time favorite band, that is R.E.M. I mean, I absolutely love everything about their sound. I mean, their songwriting is absolutely genius. Their consistency, particularly from 1982 to 1992, is just genius. Practically the entire way through. A few dozen later 90s and 90s, but we'll get into all that. Overall, the general consistency of songs, I've counted through, and no other band has had more songs that have just completely spoken to me and transformed my outlook for life for the better in so many ways. And that's just R.E.M. for you. They had the magic of purity within expression, and it's just absolutely incredible how consistent this is. I mean, it just feels like particularly the trilogy of the albums Murmur, Reckoning, and Automatic for the People it's just some of the greatest work of all time. There's so many masterful songs layered in between the albums, in between those three genius, timeless works. And golly, I just recommend this band to anybody, honestly. There's something here for everybody. And, I'd say they're probably the most important band for me in a lot of ways because they're the one that really kind of helped me just sort of see the tone of adventurism in my life and the inspiration to just, pursue my passion of filmmaking. Like, they're the band that taps into that mystique of, adventurism and just wanting to wander and explore endlessly, and Southern mystique in general. Like, they really tap into that notion in a very particular kind of way. And I think it's just absolutely wonderful what these just genius band laid out. It's very, very unique, and it feels like it's the basis of all like the 90s to come, even though this is in the 80s. Like it absolutely feels like the 90s have foreshadowed by way of their music. I think that's just so cool. It feels like it's almost laid out by way of R.E.M. and just the general basis of great alternative rock. And yeah, they're just definitely a very, very unique kind of band with just some of the best just composition ever, somewhat like murky, down to earth, but with grounded mysticism living inside of the music. Yeah, they're my favorite of all time. It's just pure and simple. I mean, and yeah, their run from that particular 10-year run is just the best of all time. So let's get into their albums. We got 1982, Chronic Town, and yeah, golly, this is just like one of the most unique sound. Like before even Murmur came out. Like, I mean, this is a song. Like, there's 5 songs on this album, and they're all just about all just perfect exemplifies of jangle pop of the 80s. I mean, this is like the masterwork, I would say, of a harder post-punk sound than R.E.M. would ever do before. Again, this is a little bit heavier as far as like a harsh punk sound, but they would go on to balance out a sound I would describe best as like kind of like that Joy Division meets the Beatles kind of thing, but their own voice entirely. But in this album, it's very different because yeah, it's just very jittery. I mean, there's a song, especially one called Carnival of Sorts, as well as 1,000. Yeah, golly. These are just songs that are just absolutely perfect because they're not really doing much but just grabbing you with just excitement and jittery, a bug of jittery. But that's R.E.M. They just kind of grab you with like a jittery bug. They feel like the butterflies. I feel like in the best way I've ever heard by way of music. What the butterflies feel like, and it's just so engaging. And I feel like, especially if you listen to the song "Gardening at Night," which is a perfect classic that exemplifies the atmosphere of a garden, and it's just so beautiful the entire way through. And I listened to this album over and over again for the past, since I've discovered this band, this is one of those bands that just came out of nowhere for me. I mean, it was like 2011 whenever I discovered, I think, my love for this band. I'd like heard a few of their songs. I was like, yeah, they're pretty cool. Orange Crush, but then I heard Murmur, and that changed me maybe like more than any other band album ever changed me outside like Radiohead stuff. What this album really did for me is just kind of give me a sense of adventurism because I feel like there's a sound that's a bit murky and depressing. In Chronic Town, I'm kind of describing both of this. This was like an EP build up to Murmur. That's 5 songs equally great as the song on Murmur. The very particular murky, sound of grounded mysticism. But I'll say that it's just kind of like a very unique kind of post-punk sound they have here, and it really does kind of lay out just the feeling of just being very jumpy, and also kind of just being in the moment, almost just being a wanderer of nature in a lot of ways. It's really beautiful. Like, I love the song Wolves Lower, which kind of just shows like a very like something a little haunting building up, but then it's very like attacking in a lot of ways. It just reminds me of something like Missions of Burmama would have released around the same time frame. It's just so cool. I feel like there's something very like, I guess, just kind of cool about the sound at the end of the day. It's like a quirky kind of cool sound, I would say. It's something kind of jumpy, but it also just feels like very, like, just interesting in the rhythms all throughout. It's always bouncy. It's always fun, a little dark, and a little mystical, but it just ultimately just feels very good on the soul. And yeah, it's just really amazing. I think what this band particularly captures and feeling. And I love Michael Stipe as a lyricist. He is in his presentation of lyrics. It's very uniquely soulful and passionate, and I think there's just so much charisma in this very, very odd frontman. But the weirdness is precisely what I can relate to in a lot of ways, because I feel like there's a man who's dying to express something spiritual, but it's hard to find the right platform to do so effectively in a way that really does impact others. And now when he has this platform, he's like showing his way of doing it, which is a genius way of doing it. So it's awesome. And then you have the perfect guitar work of Peter Buck. I mean, he's a genius. He really shows some incredible work on the song Carnival of Sorts, which is just him and Stipe really balancing out this sound that's just absolutely perfect and full of joyful harmony, which really does feel like an updated version of what a lot of stuff like Beatles and Birds were doing. But in the 80s, but it's better, I think, way better in the 80s than the 60s take on the jingle sound. I think the 80s did it so much better, particularly by way of R.E.M, bands like the Smiths. Oh, man. And then there's a song, I know this is a song that's probably going to seem a little irritating to a lot, but I love the wandering vibe of the song Stumble. It's a little bit psychedelic, but it's very satirical, I feel like, in a lot of ways, too. That kind of makes it even better, because you feel like you're just rambling around this eccentric small town and just getting into interesting, strange situations with people, but it's ultimately like fun and full of personality, and that's kind of the fun of R.E.M. They're really trying to express like something of a fun and just like joy and simplicity, and like in your connection with other people in a lot of ways. It's like why it's important to care and connect. But I think the progression from 1982 to 1992 kind of laid out something of a foundation that lies in building something for yourself, like socially, because a lot of times like it's easy, especially if you're a creative person with a lot of creative buzz, but without there's often in search of the proper outlet for it. You're gonna face those moments where it's hard, you feel way too introverted for the world. But this band is kind of trying to progress. I guess they get more popular, they become more socially conscious, but they retain something of their just innocent, good-hearted nature all throughout, which is just really excellent. I really love that, but I really love the charisma of Michael Stipe here again. I mean, he's like very mumbly in his early years, and that's my favorite era of Michael Stipe because it feels very eccentric and it's awkward. I think that's the awkwardness that I really connect to a lot. They really tap into personality within awkwardness and expression within being an awkward personality and eccentric in the best way possible. Like these guys are like genius, and they have balance. They don't overdo it at all. It's just the perfect amount of minimalism, and it's completely devoid of any like sexual energy, which is my favorite part about the band, perhaps. Like it really is just about a band that has something spiritual to say, but you're in a world, and I love people who are sexually active. That's the thing, and I really sincerely do. I have nothing against that whatsoever, but I want to be friends. But it's just I think it's an asexual, like with Michael Stipe. I can relate to that. I think he had a lot of an asexual perspective as well, which made things very awkward. But you can find something beautiful in that in your own way, And Michael Stipe is a great walking example of how a person can do that for themselves, and that much of an eccentric. But oh yeah. I mean, it's really just incredible what's captured in this album, and it's the really start of something huge. Like, I mean, that's really a cult following before R.E.M took off in the big leagues in the late 80s, early 90s. But I mean, the early 80s, they were just like kind of the ultimate wonder, just like, how does a sound like this even exist? And it's really true, I feel like. And yeah, it's so awesome. I mean, yeah, so good. This is a perfect album the entire way through, and it just feels good. But then it's post-punk expressionism. It feels very much like a happier Joy Division, which is the perfect way to describe early R.E.M. It is like Joy Division was in a happy mood, a little more of a happy mood, but still murky, a little depressed. But it's about a balance of depression and happiness, which is why I choose R.E.M as my favorite band, I feel like. I think that, there's other bands like Radiohead that come very close, but I think in the end, I think the trippiness is what motivates me just a little more about the R.E.M. I think next with depression and understanding of depression, but kind of getting through it and feeling happy when you get through it, which is I think just equally important of a foundation. The one that means the most to me personally. They have a 1983, their absolute masterpiece, the best album perhaps I've ever heard in my life, which is Murmur. This is the album that this did take off and go really well at the time. Nowadays it seems like it's a pretty underrated album, but I think I just hear the perfect jingle rock sound here. It's the perfect sound that's very like innocent, wondrous, and slightly haunting the entire way through. All of 12 of these songs are just, it reminds me of the feeling I have when I hear like Kind of Blue, where I'm just like, how do songs like this perfect exist and end up on the same album together? Because it's also distinctive and endlessly re-listenable. I mean, you have the song like Radio Free Europe, which just shows an absolute peak of style and highlight all throughout. There's just something very, very groovy about Pilgrimage and the way that it builds up in its own kind of quirky way. Again, awkward rhythm that ends up being even more perfect because it's awkward, which is just awesome. I mean, it's about the coolest sound I've ever heard. Cannibal is the best bass lines ever. Like that's the thing, Mike. Mills on the bass is a huge secret weapon, as well as Peter Buck's guitar work. I think they really matched something that really does feel like a folksy sound, like, endlessly drifting by the river kind of feeling. Best way I can describe R.E.M's music, it is like endlessly drifting by a river, and ultimately finding your own foundation by way of doing that. Songs like Laughing really capture what melancholia feels like, where you feel both happy and sad at the same time. This is a song that's literally both joyful and depressing, both at once, and I think that's about the most beautiful thing ever made. The song means so much to me. It's absolutely personal in so many ways. Of course, the title's ironic. A lot of not a lot of laughing going on, it feels like, but it builds up to, like, you feel like you want to laugh in there because it feels so real when it taps into. And West of the Fields is about the best closer ever made. Oh my gosh. I love that song so much because it just feels like it's a grand epic of, like, leaving a spiritual impact on people, mysticism. But, like, you kind of want to reject mysticism all the same because you kind of see how absurd it is at the same time. But, but you also need it at the same time. It's like an interesting, like a subtle kind of, in a progressive way for your creative type, so it's like kind of finding that balance and foundation. I mean, oh my gosh. I love the song The Groovy of Pilgrimage, which is, oh, geez, I can't get over that groove. It's so gentle and very, very odd. You have odd lines like two-headed cow, and it's very mysterious what that means. So, oh my gosh, you have like Shaking Through, Perfect Circle. Awesome. But honestly, this is just one of the most perfect album I've ever heard in my life, and I'm just taken back by this, honestly, the entire way through. It's a very one-of-a-kind sound that it captures. I feel like the aesthetic is completely unique to this album in particular. I mean, even in R.E.M's entire catalog, this is a one-of-a-kind sound that I'm absolutely addicted to, honestly. I mean, I feel like the best way I could describe the sound is that it's very cool, down to earth and mysterious, but it's also very moody, and it's just a little bit weird. I feel like it's like kind of living in the finest memories of childhood and just wandering around in nature with a sense of wonder, with a little bit of fear as well, which kind of contributes something even more magical and powerful and organic all throughout. And this album is so well balanced the entire way through. There's nothing over-dominating about the sound of R.E.M. That's what gets me so well about it. They capture the full spirit of rock and roll without any over-dominance. It's just pure, and it's right to the point of just what makes rock and roll music so great in the first place. And I can listen to this album no matter what mood I'm in, no matter how I feel. This is an album that always feels good to me. You have so many songs that are just, I would consider my all-time favorite. And I'll get in. I got to get more depth than all this. I'm just running around on it because it gets me so jittery and excited. Like, this isn't a band. I think that gets my ADHD going in the right ways. Where jazz can. I think this R.E.M. almost feels like a natural progression to what a lot of jazz was kind of doing. Where like a lot of like intense expression, but R.E.M. kind of was just like, hey, let's just chill. Kind of thing, like chill out. So keep that energy. Spiritual energy, but now it's like this is like a more social pop expression of it, which is just as perfect. It does feel like a lot of what the Beatles were doing in the 80s. It's the 80s progression of that in a lot of ways. Awesome. An American expression, you could say. American Beatles. I feel like they're the band that deserves that. The most perfect songs. God, this is just a genius album the entire way through. It's very pure. And it doesn't like feel like it's over the top in any kind of way. It just feels like the instruments are always just getting just the perfect amount of texture for it to feel very timeless and down to earth, yet it feels very like sacred and just its own thing entirely. I feel like some of these songs are just some of the catchiest, most earworm-inducing songs ever made. I mean, they're just so original sounding that I cannot stop rewinding moments of it just because it feels so freaking good. It makes me feel so sincere and happy, and it makes me just feel like a butterfly when I'm around, anything. It's about the coolest thing ever made. Oh my gosh! And this is an album I heard it like I was just literally on a road trip down to Georgia, and I went to Athens for the first time, and I heard this album. And I mean, it just changed my life, kind of being down in Athens, Georgia, hearing this album when I was a kid. And I just think like growing up, I always had a lot of mystique and wonder about all of this, and I just really love that. A band can just express that, and this just happens like like Southern Gothic mystique in the best kind of way, and I feel like. Every single song on here, it's just like We Walk is just too pretty for this earth, it feels like, but it is of this earth, which makes it even better. It's like heaven on earth in the perfect, most grounded kind of way possible, and it's just so catchy. It's just slightly bizarre, but, and it's just like a little bit of like a subtle darkness in the lyrics because the lyrics seem like much like it doesn't fit with the music. It makes it a little bit of an ironic edge. Just think about R.E.M. I feel like there's a lot of dark comedy looming over a lot of this music. A lot of subtle sense of dark humor, which I think is a lot of what I can relate to. Like finding the lightness and after going through a lot of dark humor, expressionism. The verses here are just so fantastic, and I love all the choruses. But I mean, again, some of the weirdest lyrics, like I get pilgrimage, like what? You're like a two-headed cow. I don't know what that means, but I don't care because the song is so awesome and it rules completely, and it lives in my soul eternally. That bass is so good, and it's my you got my favorite R.E.M song of all time, which is Perfect Circle, which is a perfect sound, perfect song. Maybe my favorite song ever made outside of like a few Miles Davis songs, John Coltrane. But oh my gosh, this is just a song that just completely rules. It's so good the entire way through that it just speaks to my soul in such a beautiful way. The way the pianos are kind of tuned in such an interesting kind of way, and the way the melodies are just so pure and innocent. It really is just something that takes you to a special and perfect place, and it's so gorgeous. It just completely rules, honestly. I mean, the bass work by Mike Mills is so understated. It's such like a secret weapon to R.E.M success and genius sound. It really is in the bass. These bass lines are just right at home. Catapult. It just makes me think of romping around in nature, just the best times. Just I'm feeling good inside, truly, sincerely. Catapult makes me really happy in a very special kind of way. It captures what actual grounded, like, anti-nostalgia feels like, to where it's like, you want that buzz back? Here you go. This album is, in that song in particular, is giving you that buzz back in its own sound. In a way that's timeless, and it is live on eternally. It's the innocent, truly side of it all. You have like West of the Fields. God, the mysticism of that song, Shaking Through, is just so happy. That one is just unbelievable because it really does kind of express something of joy after maybe having gone through like something of a bizarre kind of situation, but it makes me just feel really, really good the entire way through. Like, I really love that song. It really is just speak to something absolutely perfect. um, it's just so beautiful the entire way through. I really love Talk About the Passion. That's a perfect song, with a bit of a string part, but the guitar riff is so freaking engulfing. I cannot stop thinking about this song in particular, and the way that the progressions are just so natural, but they're completely colorful and completely expressionistic, and I love the song Moral Kiosk. That might be the most filler moment of the album, but it's still perfect, and it still is just a perfect song. It really flows really well with the entire album. It just feels like it's just kind of chilling out with considering some of the wondrous melodies that this whole album is expressing. There's not a moment I change this entire album. Oh yeah, 9 and 9 is perfect. I love the bass in that one so much. It's just freaking rocks. Sitting Still speaks to soothing my anxiety, which is the basis of R.E.M. I think it is kind of like finding the freedom after you soothe your anxiety, finding the happiness that comes from being a wanderer, you could say, rather than being depressed about it. This is like R.E.M's kind of like being a little more happy and joyful, after finding it. That's it right there. 100% relate to that right there. That side of it. It makes it my favorite band of all time. And again, it's the way this album's mixed that's just the most inspiring of all time. It's nothing stands out too much. It all just blends perfectly, and it's the best album of the age, right up with Kate Bush's Hounds of Love. It's like the best album of the 1980s. I feel like this is gotta be my number one. But it's just so personal, and it just feels like it takes me straight to a place that I often need to go to, and it successfully takes me there in a way that does change. It feel like it's life changing. Even in the scheme of all of R.E.M's music, but this is the one. Then you have 1984 Reckoning, which is just an equally perfect masterpiece to Murmur. I mean, this is just a perfect masterpiece. It's not as popular as Murmur, but it's equally perfect. And it feels like that album was out in the forest, kind of wandering around in nature. And now we're out in the city, and we're out with our friends in the city, but now it's like the sound's like a little bit darker, you could say, slightly. It's like a more country influenced even. Not even darker, it just feels a little more urban. Wow, I feel like Murmur is a little bit more of like a kind of hazy sort of sound, but very warm and inviting. But I feel like Reckoning's inviting as well, but there's so many songs that are just, it's pretty melancholic. It's like melancholic, moving forward from depression. Like, So Central Rain, I'm Sorry, is all about the regret, feelings of regret, but you just move on and it's okay. You find your way. If you just kind of tap into something of a greater force and a greater knowing. You have that. Don't Go Back to Rockville. It's so perfect. That's a perfect song that just kind of speaks to moving forward and not repeating, the same things from your past. And just always pursuing something forward thinking and something new. Always keeping your perspectives forward thinking, no matter what. Pretty Persuasion, coming to comfort within sexuality, and it's just like no matter what you are, asexuality I think is a tough thing. So this does express asexuality in a way that's absolutely perfect. And it speaks to my soul perfectly. And it makes me feel very, very happy about asexuality. It makes me feel very forward thinking about it. It's wonderful. Harbor Code's a perfect song, a perfect opener to the album. I love its expression within all of its pop melodies, but the bass is just it's so hopping, it's so unique. It's a little dark, a little weird, but it's absolutely perfect in what it ultimately ends in melodically. Little America just has so much to offer within its expression of lyrics. Like it's just kind of like you can tell there's a little bit of like a political energy kind of blooming. Something of like like kind of realizing that perhaps expressionism in itself, can lend itself to beautiful things, or it can lend itself to really dark things. And it's about kind of finding that in politics, discovering all that. A lot of this is kind of like growing up a little bit. Remember, a lot of R.E.M. does consist of kind of growing up, a masculine sense of growing up in a very, very beautiful way and very authentic way. And it's if you're a do it your way kind of personality, I think that's what this band is kind of showing you how to do it, like kind of how to find it yourself, and where you're having so much fun and you're enjoying it so much that you don't even realize how much it's impacting you spiritually, which is what they're out to do ultimately. Oh man, there's just not a single bad song on this album. I mean, I love the song Time After Time. It's probably the most rips still in the album, and I freaking love it. I feel like it's very atmospheric, and it really does speak to my soul directly. Just like Murmur, it's like all 10 songs of these 10 songs that are just like, how does this even real? Like it's absolutely perfect and unique what it's expressing. The song Camera is absolutely perfect. I have so many memories of like writing poetry while listening to this song. While there's like a big old party going on, I wanted to be in my room, but no one was letting me go there. Like it was just like awkward. I ended up writing this big poem about the experience, which is I guess that's pretty antisocial. But hey, it's just sharing that's kind of interesting. But yeah, absolutely perfect stuff here, and I feel like there's absolutely nothing disappointing whatsoever about this listen. I feel like a lot of people are going to hear this after Murmur, and there's something a little bit more just challenging about the sound, I will say, but it turns out to be equally impactful. Because I think it's more of like they want a spiritual desire to spiritually impact in the music as they became more popular, while retaining their innocent nature. I think that's what made it. I think so many bands will like get more popular, and it's like they sacrifice their innocent sound in a lot of ways, but R.E.M. was just out to not do that in a way that's like, yeah, that's the way to do it. Any creative type moving forward. I feel like this is so important and influential to so much art and foundations of like, the 2000s, 2010s, like the era I grew up in. I feel like this is like our Beatles in a lot of ways. Unspoken. It's so unspoken. It's so subtle, Howard, but I feel like they really did kind of change everything and laying out the 90s, in the best way possible. My favorite version of the 90s. It happened in the 80s. It's ironic, but I love the 80s too. But it feels very 90s. It just feels all so 90s in what they're doing to me. There's a little bit of like a punk sound going here, but it's very friendly ultimately. That's what really gets me about R.E.M. It's like there's a charm living inside. It's dark, a charm that lives in a knowing of dark humor and just darkness lurking within. But you just kind of chill out, and it's down to earth completely. That's what really comforts me about it so much. It feels like cozy and homey to me, and the melodies are just so pure in its expressionism. And yeah, you know what, man? It's just Mike Mills on the bass. Like I know, yeah, Paul McCartney. Yeah, I know he's like bigger, but I think Mike Mills' subtlety might just strike me even more. He is my all-time favorite bassist in the sense. I think the most inspiring to how I like to play, which is just kind of bouncy, but ultimately always focused on contributing to the melody of the song. It's just always interesting, always catchy, and it just blends so perfectly with this entire sound. Like I love the song. Oh my gosh, I gotta mention again, So Century Rain, I'm Sorry, which is just a perfect ballad of just melancholic expressionism, having regret, but with just, golly, but the guitar riff is so good that you get over that regret really, really fast, because you see that it's an ugly mood, and R.E.M. is just like, let's just be better than that ugly mood, and it's so beautiful. The bass playing here is absolutely perfect, and I love the melodic style just living inside all of this, that it's so simple, but it's just so effective all throughout. I mean, I love these songs. Yeah, golly, I can't get over Pretty Persuasion again. I get them in the comfort of my sexuality. But there's like it's a little bit darker sounding in the chorus, but it's like because it's going to be hard. At times. Judgment, just isolation in general that comes from all that. But it's worth it. But it's awesome. Absolutely love these songs. Second Guessing, I love. That's a great jam. Let Her Never Sent's a beautiful guitar song, and I feel like Second Guessing just has such great energy to it. I love all the backup vocals going on here. The drums are just, really simple. Bill Berry's like a pretty like laid back drummer, but he contributes perfectly to this unique sound of R.E.M. because the drums don't ever stand out or get to dominate you ever. Really, I think that's so pretty cool. Except for a few albums. Maybe in the come that would, like Life's Rich Pageant would kind of go on to be a little bit more like that, but not quite on Reckoning yet. Oh my gosh, that's absolutely perfect. Golly, I can't get over Camera. Yeah, again, I wrote that poem, and it always sticks with me just thinking about Peter Buck, and that just really unique guitar tone he captures here. It's very wall of sound, and it just stands out to me so much. I can't get over how good the groove is in Seven Chinese Brothers. Like, it's just so jumpy, and the way Peter Buck plays the guitar is just so shiny and jangly, and it makes me feel very, very good and happy. This is a very, very perfect follow-up, I feel like, to Murmur. It's equally great of an album, and it does kind of create something of like a loose trilogy between these three within, finding a foundation of youthful personal expressionism. I think that's kind of what the band ultimately is out to express. I love this album. And it's just incredible to me. I got to mention again, Peter Buck. Like, how does a man that just genius and simplicity exist? Like, I think it's an album that is a fine balance of, I think, like minimalism and maximalism. That's kind of what R.E.M is. I think with this particular sound, and it would become it would become a little more sociable all throughout. But I think that still what they lay out here is just really a foundation of just what personal expressionism is. But they come out of their closet a little more. And this is an interesting time. We move on to 1985 when they recorded Fables of the Reconstruction, which they went to London to record this one. And this is a very experimental album, I would say. This is definitely a challenging one and definitely one of the most difficult ones they did. But it's pretty great, though. I mean, once you kind of get into the mystique of a lot of it, it's really expressing. I think they went to London and got very nostalgic for America. They really wanted to come back home. So this is like kind of them in a mood where they're just longing, and then that longing, it kind of brings out a very distinctive mood that's a lot darker than they've ever been. Again, it's almost a little closer to like how Joy Division was doing it. Like songs like Driver 8 are kind of upbeat and jammy, but it does. That song is definitely one of their best ever because it has such a perfect guitar work on it. Got like Peter Buck, genius. That's great work on here. And then I love the song I Can't Get There From Here, which is very quirky and awesome. Life and How to Live It, very upbeat. Feeling Gravity's Pull, which is just awesome. Wendell G is amazing. And it's a very difficult album. Maybe one it's very, very murky and strange is a good way to describe it. Also very slow paced, and it feels like it's just moving everything forward from what they did here. Intense homesickness. And I feel like I know a lot of the members actually went on to not like this album because I think they hated this experience so much. But I mean, particularly Peter Buck didn't like it. But I mean, hey, I guess I can understand. That's his personal opinion on it. Okay, that's perfect though. You did a perfect job. I love the song "Feeling Gravity's Pull," which is just really quirky all throughout. It has a perfect ending living inside of it. There's something of a chaotic nature living in Auctioneer in Another Engine. They're both absolutely, that's a highlight song. Yeah, I really love the energy living in this. Kahula Tech, which has really quirky production of the 80s, which is a very light side, which I actually love. I'm very fond of that light side of the 80s. Very quirky production. Like bands like Talk Talk were kind of doing on Color of Spring particularly. Reminds me a little bit of this R.E.M sound. Though they would go on to be a little more stoic and serious. Like I think R.E.M was a little more lightened up with it. This is in perspective. Expressing something of a nature wondrous, but kind of becoming more sociable with yourself in the process. That's kind of the whole, I think, goal of R.E.M. That's what they do successfully in this particular 10-year run. But yeah, there's just something very swampy about the sound. Very weird. A lot of keys that are, that are very quirky and offbeat. But it's just really cool. This is a cool sounding album. Their sound is just simply cool. Sometimes it's further this kind of sound, just of southern, being engulfed in something of southern mystique, and just living it in a certain kind of way. Oh man, Old Man Kenzie, that's a great one. Kind of about an obsessive search for going mad. It's awesome. You got Maps and Legends, that's a great one. You got a guy just hiding his own books around his house and just getting all weird with it. Like How to Live It is just awesome, which is telling a story of something, of a bizarre yet life-changing thing that Michael Stipe once encountered. It's awesome. You got Wendell G. Oh man, perfect songs right here. A lot of doom living inside of it, but it's just the way that Peter Buck plays this very darkly. And sometimes it's kind of lovely and sweet. Sometimes it's very manic and just intense, moody. It sounds very moody. Just to think about early R.E.M. in the 80s, particularly, they were very moody. Yeah, but oh man. It's just it feels very organic too. That's the sound of R.E.M. It's always organic, always feels good. Green Gorilla Rushes is beautiful. I'm reminds you a little bit of like the energy of Seven Chinese Brothers. Reckoning. This is awesome. It's almost like Can't Get From Here almost lays out their own foundation of funk. Although it's just not really that funky. It's just kind of getting all jumpy and fun all throughout, which is just awesome. There's just something very goofy living inside of the song. I think it's just driving around with a bunch of goons, just being quirky and having fun along the way. That's what I know the feeling it gives me. There's something of like a southern charm living inside of this sound. I think R.E.M. had my all-time favorite expression is a southern charm. That's what lives in all of us, and it's like beautiful to hear this progression become more and more sociable. I mean, Good Advices is absolutely wonderful, and it's just so beautiful and subtle in its own kind of quiet way. I really love that. There's nothing shoegazy about R.E.M. sound, but there's something about a gaze that R.E.M. music puts me through. It's all about gazing. And I mean, I love the vibes living in this. Like some of the sound even reminds me of like stuff like Automatically people would kind of progress to more serious, levels. But oh man, I mean, it's just absolutely perfect. I've never heard anything quite like it. There's just a great, interesting vibe living in this album. It's one of the most underrated albums. I really think it's absolutely perfect and worth checking out. You got 1986 Life's Rich Pageant, which is now the band completely rejects everything they did before. Now they're back in America. Now the urge is to be a lot more energetic. Now they're hard rocking a lot more. They turn up their guitars a lot more to 11 than maybe they ever were outside of some rockers. And like a few albums, they maybe cranked it harder, but they were going pretty hard here. Like a lot of high rockers going on. Like These Days just really has this heavy sound of how to pertain in something of it. That's what you do with your love for nature. You kind of turn it into environmentalism. How do you express that socially? And you can get involved in politics even by doing that, even if you don't want to have anything to do with politics. But you can still say something that means something to people, because you want to break the barriers of politics, but you have to kind of know it exists all the same and know about it, in order to break through and kind of see something beautiful. That's what R.E.M. was out to express. It's just absolutely perfect, I think. I mean, I love that song. These Days, it's absolutely perfect. Fall on Me is a perfect song, perfect melodies. I love the ballad song Swan H, which is just very influenced by like stories of the Civil War. There's a very quirky take on Superman, which is okay. Not one of my favorites, but it's pretty awesome still. Covering just a very innocent 50s sound in a very mid 80s kind of way. There's just something very laid back about this whole sound, and it's just very, very loud in its own kind of way, but I love that. It's just a great album. And one of the best albums they did. I mean, I love even like the songs that are just kind of bridges in between, like Hyena. It builds up to the beautiful song Flowers of Guatemala, which has beautiful guitar work. And I Believe is just a very, beautiful song of soul, just expressing what it is to feel kind of happy and refined. And, even if you fought through a battle, it is to kind of come back to that newfound joy. And kind of turning stuff like Hyena's kind of almost just taking the foundation of Perfect Circle to something a little bit more punk, which is really interesting and experimental. Underneath the Bunker is okay. It's just, it just kind of, flows through. It's just right in the middle. Oh, man. Yeah, I really like how Michael Stipe's singing a lot more audible now. It's like a lot louder. And the band just has so much charisma, and I feel like it's expressing something perfect for this odd frontman. I mean, these songs just really get me with an environmentalism and just seeing what it is to just, do good within your love for nature. I love Begin Again, which is just a great song, which just kind of calls to arm with just moving forward, just want to kickstorm, like just everything that makes you angry, basically. And they were looking ahead at all the angry politics, and Ronald Reagan was president at the time, and there was a lot of urge to just, kick this freaking thing down, in every way. That's what they were out to do. But yeah, I love These Days, which is just, some of the lyrics are so fast paced, but man, it sounds awesome. It's just so great. There's a song called Just a Touch, which kind of follows a similar formula, but it's just about as fantastic. But all these songs are just really wonderful. You got songs that are just really mellow and chill, like Fall on Me, and just very jangly sound all throughout, which is just very, very wonderful. Like What If We Give It Away? It's kind of quirky and goofy. Oh man, yeah, my favorite one on the album, Cuyahoga, which is just a freaking boogie. I mean, the bass is so good, and it just gets further into like simplicity than environmentalism, appreciating the river as it flows, but what do you do after, what do you do with that, that foundation? It's absolutely wonderful. There's nothing too pretentious about R.E.M. I think that's what I find so refreshing. They're refreshingly very unpretentious in what they express. It's something that should be pretentious, basically, but they do it in a way that's just completely cool. Like, all right, like this is completely innocent, completely like rocking, but it's all that, but it really has impact in it too. It's timeless impact. They were a band that was starting to almost get a little over. Like it seems like they were getting a little over the top, but they never lost their innocence. To like past like '94. They hit burnout, but they never really lost their innocent nature, which is, I think, a really refreshing thing to hear from the band. Most bands lose that. R.E.M. never did. They always kept it together. Their whole 30-year run. 1987, you have Document. Yeah, this album really made the band popular. But ironically, it's probably the most experimental album they ever did here, which is not one of my favorites by them, actually, because something about them being in their sound of purity is what gets me the most about it. I mean, here's a song that's pretty good, like the Finest Work song. Some of the songs are kind of weird, like Exhuming McCarthy. King of Birds, Disturbance of the Heron House. It's amazing. I love the guitar work in that one. I don't really like Oddfellows Local 151. I really love the song Welcome to the Occupation. That one's pretty awesome. You got One I Love. Honestly, it was the song Follow Me that really made them popular after the previous album, Life for Rich Pageant. They kind of started this whole new popular phase of. I feel like that's the thing about R.E.M. I feel like they just kind of kept going through these. They had about 4 phases, I feel like. Then this is their second one kind of building up. At first they were kind of like the kings of just like indie rock, so kind of like the grounded, like rock and roll, low key rock and roll. But then they kind of became this phase 2 era, which is just kind of like now they're like, now their hail is like, okay, they're the genius voice, of the time. So, they were just like kind of like popular rock band now. But now they kind of hit a progression of like, dude, I don't know what we're doing. It's almost awkward to be this popular now because they're so down to earth and homely that they kind of preferred more indie, I think. And I think in a lot of ways, when they got more popular, it got more awkward in a lot of ways. Especially even in like the sound progression. We'll get into all that. It's not like Fireplace is like kind of experimental, but it's okay. King of Birds is pretty good. It has a pretty interesting guitar work living inside of it. Lightning Hopkins is kind of like R.E.M. being weirdly funk, but the results are pretty bad here. It's not as good as like Can't Get Hit There from Here. I think that was my favorite example of R.E.M. being funky like this. But yeah, Peter Buck's awesome with the guitar work, and it's just really interesting and unique. But the tone he expresses on this album all the same. I really love Welcome to the Occupation. It's got something kind of menacing living inside of it, but there's something very beautiful in that guitar work. That's one of my all-time favorite songs. Exhuming McCarthy, I love that one. Just fine with the guitar work. Disturbance of the Heron House is one of my all-time favorites because there's something kind of quirky about it in a lot of ways. I like Strange a lot. That one's pretty good. But you brought and then one of their biggest hits also, the One I Love. That was a big one. That was just quite excellent the entire way through. And then you got the adrenaline rush of It's the End of the World as We Know It, and I Feel Fine, which is just kind of like an ultimate expression of like dark comedy expressionism and having a good time along the way. It's almost a little nonsensical, but it just kind of feels good in the soul what it's expressing ultimately. And it's like this wasn't really like like a bad album. This is a pretty good album. I mean, like I said, some of these songs were really great, but it definitely feels like up to Automatic for the people. The albums were getting progressively just a little more just okay rather than just like groundbreakingly amazing. Then you got Dead Letters Office, which they released in 1987, which is just like a package, which just is not like it just contained a lot of their beef cuts throughout their early 80s stuff, which some pretty good stuff in here. They cover a lot of Velvet Underground songs, which is like that was one of their biggest influences. I think they brought a lot more of a friendly sound to what the Velvet Underground was doing. I think they had a lot of nihilism, and R.E.M. kind of brought a friendliness to nihilism. I think that's what made them so unique and special, especially in this run of sound. There's an interesting version of the Seven Chinese Brothers, but I love the Reckoning version much better. I prefer Michael Stipe's Rambley in that early sound. It just fits so perfectly because it's like his voice is an instrument rather than attempting to be overly audible. It's the perfect balance. That's how a social awkwardness kind of feels to me. So it's perfect. In 1988, we have Green, which is it's got some underrated moments, but it's not the album I would recommend necessarily. Although this is an album that made it extremely popular. I mean, they get huge from this album. It's increasingly awkward for the band because I think they preferred it kind of low key and chill. I love the song Stand. There's something almost goofy about it, but it just makes me really happy. Orange Crush is pretty awesome. That's why the first song I ever heard by them. It's pretty great. World Leader Pretends great and very impactful lyrics. But I mean, it's probably the weakest. Again, progressively, I feel like they're getting a little weaker here. There's moments that are really fantastic. I really love. I mean, Bill Berry's got some pretty great joining in Orange Crush, and I think that's what really stands out about it. The drumming there really sticks out a lot. A lot of these songs just have a song of purity within its pop sound. It's just a lot of it's very goofy and fun, and it's like I just enjoy it. Like it honestly kind of feels like it's a little funny too. Like it's a little nihilistic and it's a pop expressionism, which is just even more awesome. I like to Turn You Inside Out. I Remember California. They're pretty great. I like Get Up. Pop Song 89. It's just kind of so freaking catchy and ridiculous that it should be out. It shouldn't even exist, but it's a lot of fun. All kind of spoofing, I think. It's very ironic. Like, I love the irony living in their sound, spoofing stuff. But oh yeah, I love the guitar, the cello living in it. Yeah, so like Peter Buck brings up the cello, numerous times at this point. It's really great. It lends itself great to World Leader Pretend. And that's the thing. I think that Michael Stipe was building his ego at a big point. I think that's what was bothering them about becoming too popular. It was they're almost uncomfortable with that much wrestle of the ego. They're becoming like best band in the like the pressure. Like again, like you could tell, like in the '90s, he was relating a lot to like Kurt Cobain, in Nirvana and stuff. You could tell he was probably battling the same thing, but I think he was a lot. They were able to kind of consistently retain something of their happiness along the way. But I mean, I really, really love some of the sounds here. But ultimately, it's not one of my all-time favorites. It's definitely not an all-time classic, but pretty underrated. I mean, in the songs and moments. But yeah, Out of Time, which is that's a pretty disappointing one overall. I mean, outside of the one massive, amazing masterpiece in itself, Losing My Religion, nothing else here is really stand out. That's a huge one. That's one of their best songs. But everything else around it's just okay. I mean, Shiny Happy People is hilarious because it's like the most ironically happy song ever, which just feels annoying, but I kind of enjoy the chirpiness of it. I think there's a little bit of cheese to it, but it's honestly all the better for it. I really enjoy that. It's pretty awesome, but some of it's a little goofy. A lot of it's really fun. And I'm just always having a good time, like while listening to songs, even if I don't love it particularly. R.E.M. just has flow through their albums, and I can just kick back and just enjoy it while feeling energy. It feels energetic, and I feel like low key energized in a very introverted way. That's I think the energy R.E.M. wants to ultimately tap into your soul, like an introverted sort of joy. Any person can find if they want it. The R.E.M. has it right here for you. So we got now this is like their other masterpiece. This is on the same leagues as like the Murmur. A Reckoning, although I may love that sound slightly better, but this album is just as great. Automatic for the People, which she released in 1992. Oh, I can't recommend this album enough. I mean, this is, really, really important and impactful in so many ways, particularly the final 3 songs of this album, Man on the Moon, Night Swimming, and Find the River, which is the perfect trilogy of songs of kind of just the man finding his ultimate inner nirvana and joy, and peace. It's really beautiful. While songs are like Rockin' Like Ignore Land, there's just a great kind of song, which is great guitar work. Sweetness Follows is great. There's like something of a weird jazz feeling living in Stormy Kitten. Night Swimming is great. This is an album that just makes me think of like just loneliness in the summer and a man just kind of pondering some depression, but ultimately feeling okay, feeling like it's going to be all right, in a lot of ways. It's really beautiful how it expresses that so candidly. But I think what blows me away is just how simple and down to earth it is what it's trying to express, which is just kind of like caring about people matters at the end of the day. I think that's what they had to find through this complication of becoming the most popular band, for a certain phase. How to retain their egos to a way that's very healthy. I think Michael Stipe found his way. It made him a little over the top emotional, but it works in a way that's like, Magnolia, did Paul Thomas Anderson stuff. It reminds me of that impact in a lot of ways. But I mean, it's really, really great. I love the lyrics to this album so much. And I think it's an album that's just trying to communicate that living your life to your fullest will help you perceive death as nothing out of an ending, but rather a beginning. Seeing that there's something new always out there. But it's also encouraging you to enjoy every day and seize the moment. Live your life to its fullest and create your own heaven on earth so you can kind of just be ready to, just die doing what you love. And that's just, it hits in the soul perfectly. Obviously I don't intend to die anytime soon, but it just captures that feeling of just like facing anything, not being afraid, fearlessness for what it is that you want. It really communicates that in such a beautiful and pure kind of way. Again, this is the big theme of this album is that death is not something to be afraid of. You have the song Sweetness Follows, which just has a lyric of live your life of joy and thunder. And, this is kind of a song that's talking about someone dying, but it's kind of saying not to let death get to the best of you, but just rather perceive it as life goes on and acting like that, death is a big deal. It's basically an insult to maybe the dead person's memory. Perhaps it's better to live in their name rather than, mope too much about it. I mean, obviously you need that moment, but I think that, they very much continue encourage moving on in the face of death. And I love albums that tap into that notion. It can be very hard to be hopeful in the face of death, but this album does that successfully. Try Not to Believe. Try Not to Breathe. It feels like a person who isn't afraid to die because they feel like they're completely fulfilled in what they're doing. You find fulfillment so much in something that you feel like you're ready to just die for it. It's absolutely perfect. And the song "Find the River" is my second favorite. Right next to their "Perfect Circle" is just suggesting that there really is something better in this life. There's something absolutely beautiful out there. I really, really love this. It really is an ultimate expression of just like it isn't the end. Death isn't the end whatsoever. I love the song "Monty Got a Raw Deal." That has a great mandolin hook. And I love the jazz of "Stormy Kitten." New Orleans Instrument No. 1 is pretty nice. Reminds you of something off the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds. Sweetness Follows is great in Norland. I really enjoy all of this, and it's very great to hear R.E.M. just take on all these interesting and unique sounds. Like, it's really cool. But drive it captures when it's melancholy. Oh, John Paul Jones, bass, Led Zeppelin does some work here too. That's pretty cool. But again, I can't express how perfect the final 3 songs on this album are. Man on the Moon. That's one of those popular songs, but it's very happy. I feel very, very happy when I hear that song, simply. It's a very great celebration of humanity and just feeling happy in general. Night Swimming is a perfect ode to just, beauty and memories, friendship. And it's the ultimate story of just kind of finding just something absolutely beautiful in simplicity. And it's very, very tear-inducing how beautiful it is. And it makes this feeling completely flawless. And Find the River is just completely epic while sentiment at the same time. And it's one of the best things I've ever heard in my life. Very, very important and life-changing. That's automatic for the people in a certain way. It's absolutely great. It's our ultimate coping mechanism for very, very difficult situations. And it makes it feel okay. I just feel like hopeful and touching. It really feels like a special kind of care was coming out of this album. The care for others. And you have a 1994 Monster. I feel like, okay, now moving forward, honestly, R.E.M. was like, okay, now we're not really on those leagues of perfect, but it's still pretty great. I mean, on a few of the 90s, more albums of the 90s, which is Monster. This is interesting because this is the heaviest album they ever made, like, by far. I mean, this amps it up even harder than Life from Rich Pageant, which isn't necessarily one of their best sounds, but it's pretty great now. I mean, it's pretty good. Maybe not great, but it's good. It's got some glam energy. Michael Stipe is literally getting glam, and I think, I don't know, it's like he got a little sexually frustrated again after automatic for the people, which put him in a kind of an interesting, weird mood. I think the R.E.M. is literally too weird whenever there's a little bit of that sex energy. Because that's the thing about R.E.M. They're not a sex band. That's what makes them so perfect. There's not sex energy living in the sound whatsoever. No, it's completely like awkwardness and within spirituality. Oh man, I really love a lot of the songs here. Like, Strange Currencies was pretty great too. I mean, What's the Frequency Kenneth is freaking rocks. That song is so great. I mean, that's absolutely stands as one of their greatest songs, I would say. Right up there with all their perfect songs of the 80s, the early 80s. Oh, jeez. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's not perfect. Again, it fits pretty well with 90s grunge, but it's not a standout like any of R.E.M's earlier stuff. It's just nothing like they did anything before. It's pretty unique, so it's interesting to hear a very unique sound. And we have a 1996 New Adventures in Hi-Fi, which is a little messy, but it's interesting and pretty great in the end. I still kind of love it. It's still kind of rewarding because it feels like going out on a road trip to the desert, just kind of wandering, getting lost. But there's a lot of other albums I feel like just drifting somewhere, going to your own place. Yeah, I really love a lot of this stuff, Some of it's like, some of the songs here are not perfect, but ultimately, the good ultimately outweighs the bad. I think it's the last classic they had, honestly. E-Battle Letter's a pretty great song. EO's Electrolyte's pretty great. I don't really like Zither or Low Desert. That part kind of drags a little too much, but then it comes pretty great again with like Beaky the Doormat. New Test Leper is pretty good. Be Mine. I feel like a lot of this stuff, it's like a ramble, but that's like what it feels like sometimes. I mean, it's like a mood piece that feels very summertime. This feels very particular to summertime. Just sort of being outside and it kind of being a little post-grunge, It's like taking in some grunge influence, but really making it more subtle than Monster. And I prefer this album over Monster because it's a little more subtle, but I really enjoy the grunge tone kind of living a lot of these songs, like Departure and Undertow. It's a little weird too, but it's like a good kind of weird and quirky. I really love Patti Smith, and she has a pretty great moment here. Yeah, I really like a lot of this stuff. How the West Was Won and Where We Got Us. That's a pretty good. Maybe a little bit over the top, but it's like, hey, it's pretty cool all the same sound. Electrolyte's very adorable sounding, very cute. Like that's the thing. Sometimes they got very cute too. Like it reminds me of like some of Brian Wilson stuff with the Beach Boys, where it's just like, oh man, like innocent sounding, you know. Although even if the man's been very depressed too, like that's awesome. I really enjoy that. Honestly, from here on out, yeah, and I'll still cover the albums, but yeah, they definitely. Honestly, I feel like the band Radiohead kind of took the foundation of R.E.M. and continued it forward thinking in ways that are so much better, like than not what R.E.M. did before. I prefer. They're honestly tied for me. I mean, I was very close to choosing Radiohead, but by a hair, I think R.E.M. just motivates me in life a little more. So I have to take the one that motivates me. Well, the Beatles might be a little too happy. That was my third, my number 3 band. maybe or may not do a review on those. I'll see. But R.E.M. is the one I feel like I had to talk about because I think a whole run of everything I talked about before. There's about I counted more songs I love than any other band, I've ever heard. So, which yeah, turned out to be about 60-something songs I would consider absolutely masterpiece, genius, so timeless, and will just live on forever. It always influence me in whatever I'm doing, inspire me. Strive for the best outlook I can while having a good time and celebrating life. And all of its chirpy glory. It's awesome. I like falling in love with that chirpy energy. In 1998 we have Up. Yeah, and this really feels like I think honestly R.E.M. heard OK Computer. I think that album changed their life so much that they had to make an album that feels very much like it. It's not awful, but it's just very like kind of just dull experimentation for the most part. It feels like trying to like kind of take on like technology and getting kind of adapting to some like electronica a little bit, which is just the sound's ultimately more awkward. I love the song At My Most Beautiful. That's a really beautiful piece. That does remind me again of a lot of Pet Sounds stuff. Like but everything else here is just a little more annoying than it is. But I think R.E.M. just always wanted to retain that youthful energy, but it feels like it's just a little worn out. It's like a burnt out sound rather than it is like just bad, really. It's not horrible. It's just kind of tired. It feels like I just don't really feel the power and impact. It just kind of feels like another sound of alternative rock in the end. I feel like it just doesn't really have much of a standout to it. Yeah, it feels like Michael Stipe just kind of loses that sense of that purity. Like it feels like he's just kind of losing himself and it just kind of enjoying. I don't know, just kind of the ego that built up. It almost feels like not like it went too far, but it just kind of made him a little more boring. I feel like not in a way that like relates to other people as much. I feel like he's just too far in his own planet now, so it's like it's hard to relate to him at this point. I think that's a lot of it. I mean, the song "Suspicion's" okay. Kind of a bit of a moody, buzzy feeling about it. That feels very meditative, but I kind of enjoy that. But yeah, Hope's okay. That's a song. It just kind of has more, maybe some electronica touches. Just end up feeling a little more. No, it's nothing compared to what like Radiohead was doing on the computer. I mean, that stuff's just on another league. I mean, I'll certainly be interested in covering Radiohead because they're so close to being my number one. But again, I always feel like that it's almost like the comparison of Stanley Kubrick to Paul Thomas Anderson, where I think Kubrick's are more perfect, but I think Paul Thomas Anderson's got more human. It's perfect, but it has a little more humanism. I think Radiohead's more perfect, and R.E.M. just is equally perfect feeling, but with a lot more humanism. It's more down to earth, and it just ultimately drives me to do things a lot more. Radiohead might depress me more, while this is like R.E.M. is depressing, but now it's like it makes me want to live. Ultimately, that's the most important part. Yeah, My Most Beautiful is a great song. That's the big highlight here. It's okay. Yeah, Reveal. They did that in 2001. There's a few okay moments here, like All the Way to Reno's okay. And I really love the song Invitation of Life. That's got a great rocker, but everything else is just pretty boring here. And it feels like the sound's a little more annoying than anything else. It's just. But hey, what's cool is it doesn't feel like they're trying to revive it anything about their 80s sound. It's completely, they're always being original at least. So I think that's kind of cool. Like they're always staying true to just being new, even if the new isn't really as great as their classic stuff. Sounds a little glossy. It just sounds like a burnt out sound. I don't think they were quite on the leagues of what Radiohead was doing in the 2000s, like with Kid A and Rainbows. But I really love some of the gorgeous melody of Invitation to Life. That's a pretty brilliant song. I really enjoy that. It's pretty awesome. A few songs I don't like. I've Been High, Disappear, Saturn's Return. They're just kind of boring. Just the noodly. It feels like a lot of it is. I think the noodly is a good word to describe the sound. It's almost just feels like it's just rambling, just showing off stuff without a lack of substance. There's a very intense lack of substance. I think R.E.M. is one of the most substantial bands ever in 1982 to 1992, particularly. I think you're just losing substance after that. Automatic for the people. I think they just said everything important they had to say. They just started to kind of, which is cool. I mean, they did their foundation. This is just kind of the aftermath. We're just, hey, honestly, after here, just even R.E.M would say it. Just turn to Radiohead because they think Radioheads are like the gods of music, while Radiohead thinks that R.E.M's are the gods of music, which is just awesome. I love that attitude, which is ultimately what the music is expressing. So I think I'm chilling out a little bit about all this stuff. It's perfect. Around the Suns, yeah, it's okay. I mean, Leaving New York has pretty nice moments, but it's pretty boring for the most part. It just kind of has some. I think it's kind of like 2006. I don't even remember. I'm so bored of this album. I don't care that much. But yeah, Around the Sun's okay. Something like Worst Show Ever, which is geez, that one's pretty bad. I feel like they're just doing more stuff with again. It's just like now we're in late 2000s, and it just feels like they're just kind of trying to do this like poor man's OK Computer, basically, which is just okay. Not moving things forward necessarily here. Outsiders and Ascend of Man's okay. There's nothing really too special going on here. They had a pretty great live album in 2007. I mean, that had a few songs that kind of stood out. Songs that made some of their later stuff like Around the Sun just a little more interesting. And ultimately, it's not one of my favorites. They did another one in 2011 that's better. Accelerate was kind of probably the closest that sounds like their 80s stuff, which is pretty good. Maybe it's a little overplayed, but it still feels like they're just experimenting and having a good time with experimentation here. It feels like I feel the looseness of the band a little bit better here, although it's still not one of my favorites. It's still like it just feels like it's style over substance practically entirely. And again, I just want to listen to In Remos by Radiohead. For this, what this sounds is going for. 2011, the last album they did, Collapse in the Now, which is a little better. Again, they kind of pick up with a few songs that like Discover is pretty great. That feels like an ultimate goodbye, but it's still not one of their best songs. It doesn't break anything new, but it does feel like it doesn't feel like it's anything like I feel Automatic for the People's a stronger goodbye than this. It doesn't really too stand. It's just them just playing around. It feels like, which is pretty good. Uberland's all right. Some of the stuff's pretty good. But the more memorable release they had in 2011, this feels like a better proper goodbye. It's Live at the Olympia, which is a pretty great live album. And I feel like, yeah, that one definitely kind of just feels like a summation of a lot of their sound. And a lot of their sound and the energy of the 80s is just kind of back here in a very unique, special kind of way. Like, Michael Stipe's just kind of completely chilled out here. And yeah, he's just more like a relaxed man. He's intense, but he's just, I think, a little bit. I think he portrays himself a little more about his classic Hoppin' energy here. A lot of interesting songs, like covers like Second Guessing, so Central, and a lot of their Reckoning sound comes back here. Fables of Reconstruction and Life's First Pageant, particularly. There's a lot of energy living inside of that. Even the Murmur stuff is pretty awesome. West of the Fields is here. That's pretty great to hear. But yeah, that's R.E.M. Yeah, they are a one-of-a-kind, special, impactful band. Never heard anything quite like them, and I absolutely love them. I love this sound so much. I love their songwriting, and I love everything about the way they make me feel. And it feels like they particularly hit me in the weather of like spring and fall weather. Just like in the prime moments of like changed seasonal weather. And the R.E.M. feels like the band to listen to when you feel that way, and it's in the seasonal progression. It's just, yeah, I highly recommend this band to anyone. They can do no wrong by getting into an R.E.M. kick. They're absolutely incredible, one of a kind. I highly recommend.